I don't know who set this up, but it wasn't a blind guy. I can assure you that. Boy, it's good to be here. It seems like I'm always here. Those of you old enough to remember the old Johnny Carson show, they used to have people that would fill in, and they were there more than Johnny. And that's the way I feel every time I come here. And and I'm a professional speaker, and I found out a long time ago it's a whole lot easier to get a new crowd than a new talk. So I move around a lot, and it's going to stretch me a little today.
I'm going to help you with the mic.
All right.
Get it up over here more.
There we go. Good. I got a lot of problems in my life, but being heard's usually not one of them. No, so today I'm going to have to go a little further afield to try to get to some material some of you guys haven't heard. And this always happens because of my friend Ted Robertson. Several months ago, I heard Ted had a fall, so I called him. I was concerned, and I said, Ted, are you okay? And, he told me that, old tire guys are really tough, and of course, everybody knows he's Rubberhead Ted. He just bounces off the stuff. But, I wasn't sure he was okay until he said, well, Jim, I still believe in free speech. And, as you guys, I've told you before, Ted's a constitutional scholar, and he knows I'm one of the highest paid speakers in North America, but it doesn't bother him because he believes in free speech. And several times a year, he calls me up to make a free speech. So I knew he wasn't suffering any head injuries or brain damage when he said, we need you to come out, and he set up the date and everything. So, that's the way, this will be the case until Ted dies and about 10 years after, That's what we deal with. But, Ted's a great American. He graduated in his high school class. A lot of people don't realize Ted graduated high school. And Ted graduated in the half of his class that made the upper half possible. That's the kind of guy we're talking about here. Ted gets up every day and reads the obituaries and wonders why people die in alphabetical order. And I kind of track it because Ted and my father were born about 9 days apart. They both have a birthday coming up this month, and so I follow it. And when you get to be Ted's age, everything doesn't work as good as it used to, And I heard that Ted went to the doctor the other day, and he said, Doctor, I'm having a problem here. I can't hear out of this one ear. And the doctor said, well, Ted, I can solve your problem. He looked in there and said, you got a suppository stuck in your ear. And Ted says, well, Doc, you solved two problems. Now I know where my hearing aid is. Work on that a minute. It'll come to you. That's what I call a thinking person's joke right there. I keep thinking if I insult him enough, he won't ask me back, but it never happens. And I do want to say I did give him 100 and he offered 2. I just upped it to 3, so the ball is in his court. Hold that phone.
You put 2 more down?
They're right there. Nobody knows what you do with any of them, Ted, but so the ball is in his court. So anyway, it is delightful to be here. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about today, which is a strange experience for me. I have about 3 hours worth of material, and you guys have all heard it all several times. So I had a new book out about 2 weeks ago. It's called The 100 Worst Employees. I wrote a book several years ago called The 100 Worst Bosses, and true stories from all around the world. So I wrote a book called The 100 Worst Employees. Ted was not in the book. You got to go out to 104, 105 before you get to Ted. But this was just the 100 worst employees, and it's learning from the worst how to be your very best. Because a lot of times we can disagree on what's the best meal or the best music or the best movie. But boy, when you see a bad one, everybody knows. And you can learn a lot from what you don't want to be. So I was thinking about that, and I'm going to talk to you today about being the best. Because whatever it is you do, you're doing it as unto the Lord. And if it's not worth doing your best, you need to find something different to do. And I'm going to break it down best, B-E-S-T, balance, enthusiasm, single-mindedness, and tenacity. And over the last few years, a lot of people have been talking about balance. And they talk about this life balance, work-life balance. And for most people, that means work less and horse around more. But I would encourage you today to think of balance means raising everything in your life to its ultimate level. You're not lowering anything, you're raising everything. And if you're doing something that isn't worth that kind of effort, quit doing it and go find something that is worth doing that for. And, but when we talk about work-life balance, people tell me all the time what their priorities are. I have 10 million books in print and my phone number and emails in all of them, so you can imagine how many people I hear from. And I respond to everyone around the world, and I have a very good group of people that helps me. But, I see so many people that are trying to succeed in life, and I look at why they don't, but you've got to have that work-life balance. This thing we call compartmentalization, dividing up our life into family, faith, finance, fun, all those fitness things, all those things. That's a good way to measure things, but that's not how our lives are. We're one being, and we are indeed not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. That's what we are doing here today. And, I've shared that with a lot of people. I had a guy come up to me afterwards and said, I'm an atheist, I don't believe that. And I said, well, someday you will. Someday you'll understand there's more than this here. There's more than this here. And that's the beginning of all faith, is the fact there's more than this here. But we all have a tendency to get out of balance. Several years ago, I came home from work. I'd been working on a big project with a network TV group for 7 months, and I finally got the deal done. And I came in the house, and my wife, Crystal, said, how was your day today? I said, I got that deal signed. And I got off, I got all excited about it, and then I realized she has no idea what I'm talking about. You guys have done that, haven't you? Been working on something for 7 months, and the person I live with and love has no idea what I'm talking about. And I decided right then, that's never going to happen to me again. So from that day to this, I spend an hour every morning with Crystal. We sit and we have our coffee, no phones, no TV, no radio, no newspaper. We sit and talk for an hour every day. And that has transformed my life. And I've had people tell me, man, you're committed. No, I'm committed when I do my sit-ups. That's committed. Spending an hour with Crystal is not a commitment. That's a joy. And if you're not living with someone you feel that way about, you need to work on it. Because there was a day you felt that way. And anytime we had a feeling in the past, we can get it back in the present. And at that same time I made that realization about Crystal, I realized my parents, who I owe everything to, I've gotten far more wealth, acclaim, fortune, fame, everything, just telling people the way I was raised. If everybody had the benefit of being raised by George and Florine Stovall, I'd have to find a way to do honest work. I really would. But I realized my parents lived 3 miles from my house, and I hadn't seen them in several months. And I said, that stops. I call my parents every day. We talk on the phone. And then every Friday afternoon, I hang out with Mom and Dad. And that has been a blessing to me in my life. And there will come a day when I won't be able to do that. And the only regret I'll have is that I didn't spend 2 days with Mom and Dad every week. And, we all talk about what our priorities is, but unfortunately, guys, we live in a world when it's all said and done, there's way too much said and far too little done. And, you can tell me or tell yourself what your priorities in this life are, but I ought to be able to figure it out if I look at your bank account and at your calendar. How you spend your time and money is what your priorities are. Everything else is just conversation. And we need to quit lying to ourselves, because all lies are lies we tell ourselves that we share with everybody else. And, there's a guy here in town, he's a professional speaker like I am. And I really like this guy. We're good friends, but the last 4 times I saw him was in the Admirals Club in the airport in Dallas switching planes. And I finally said, hey, man, what are you doing this for? You're killing yourself out here. Because he has 5 little kids. And I said, what are you doing out here? He said, I'm doing it for the kids. I said, really? Really, how's that helping them? You know, I mean, it's great to be a provider, but it's better to be there. So the first thing in BEST, B-E-S-T, is balance. Next is enthusiasm. That's the first thing we get when we come into this world, and the last thing we leave behind is enthusiasm. It comes from the word ethos, Greek for spirit within. And any theologians out there, I realize that's not exact, but it's frighteningly close. Ethos, spirit within, enthusiasm. And shortly after I started the Narrative Television Network, we do movies and television that are accessible to 13 million blind and visually impaired people around the world. And I had convinced television stations and cable systems all across the country to carry my movies at various times of the day and night. And we were preparing to send them up via satellite, and we had over 1,000 stations. And there's a guy who used to work for me. I know you guys don't know anybody like this, but he's one of these guys that love to find problems. And not only did he like to find them, he liked to go around and tell everybody, just throw up on everybody. I was giving a speech not long ago, and somebody asked our marketing director, Kelly, could you get Jim to quit saying throwing up? I mean, this is a dinner meeting. And she said, look, it took me 5 years to get him to start say throwing up. You should have heard what he used to say. So this guy would run around just throwing up on everybody. And one day he came into my office and he said, Jim, we have a serious problem. We're not going to make it. We should probably just shut the company down now because we're in trouble. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you have committed to over 1,000 TV stations and cable systems to deliver them our narrated movies at various times of the day and night, and our movies are too short. I said, what are you talking about? He said, we've committed to 2-hour blocks of programming, and our movies only average an hour and a half long. What are you going to do about it? Because we're on national television in less than 2 months. Well, I didn't know what I was going to do about it, but I wasn't going to tell him. It's bad enough to be ignorant. You don't have to tell everybody. It's one thing if people suspect you're stupid, you don't have to open your mouth and confirm it. So I said the first thing came to my mind. I said, I'm going to host a talk show, and I'm going to interview these movie stars that are in these movies before and after the film and fill out that half hour. And shortly after that, I had to release him to go find an opportunity somewhere else. I told him, I have enough problem with my competition. I don't need to pay people to bring me problems. And then my young lady I founded Narrative Television with, Kathy Harper, she was legally blind. I'm totally blind. And she could see with that big magnifying glass, so she and I headed off, blind leading the blind. You may have heard about us. But we went to the Tulsa Public Library and found a book called Addresses of the Stars. And I said, read me some of those names. And she said, well, there's Frank Sinatra and Katharine Hepburn, Jimmy Stewart, Michael Douglas. I said, yeah, write those down. I'll let them be on my show. And we came back to the office and we wrote a brief letter to some of the biggest names in movies, television, sports, entertainment, and politics. And I told them what a great career opportunity I was going to give them for no money to come on my non-existent mythical talk show. And could you please hurry up and let us know, because we're on the air now in about 6 weeks. We had a moment of silence and sent those letters out. It was 10 days later, an envelope came in the mail, and it said Katharine Hepburn, New York City. And I was excited. She had won her last Academy Award. She turned down Letterman and Leno. She wasn't doing much. And I thought, man, I figured she turned me down, but maybe she signed the letter, and at least we got an autograph, something. And Kathy opened it up, whipped out her big magnifying glass, and it says, Dear Jim, if you'll call this number, we can discuss the interview, Katharine Hepburn. So I called the number, and I'm ready to talk to her assistant or her secretary, whoever answers her phone. And Miss Hepburn answers the phone herself in that Katharine Hepburn voice. I won't try to do for you today. You got to come to one of the big arena events to get the Hepburn voice. Now, I know there's 7,000 people here because I heard a rumor. But you got to come to a big event. There's no free speech for the Hepburn voice. I think everybody ought to have something to look forward to. And she answered the phone in that Katharine Hepburn voice, and I said the only thing I could say, I mean, I'm this blind guy from Oklahoma, trying not to pass out under my desk. And I said, Miss Hepburn, I'm surprised you answer your phone. She said, Jim, don't you answer your phone? She said, I've always felt when one's phone rings, one should answer it. I said, of course they should. I really wish I hadn't brought that up. Well, long story short, we did the interview, Central Park South in New York City, and I remember the question that stays with me and reminds me why we have to have enthusiasm. I said, Miss Hepburn, you're the greatest actress of your generation. You won 4 Academy Awards. No one else has done anything like that. What would you have done had you not been an actress? She said, well, I would have had to find a way to support my habit because I have an innate need to do what I do. The fact that they pay me for it is incidental, but I have an innate need to do this. And you and I need to have that kind of enthusiasm about what we do all day, every day. You need to work hard, play hard, that's balance. You need to thank God it's Friday when you're going to recreate and spend some time with your family and your church, but you also need to thank God when it's Monday because I get to go do it again, because it matters. And I promise you, if you're only worried about the money, you'll never have any. If you'll worry about the service and everybody you take care of, you'll have more money than you know what to do with. You'll be able to pledge more than Ted Robertson for the box drive. So B is for balance, E is for enthusiasm, S is for single-mindedness. In the landmark book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill wrote the best book ever in my field of personal development. It's sold over 100 million copies. No one's ever come close to that. He has 13 success principles. Number 1 is definiteness of purpose. The world belongs to the man or woman who has a definite purpose and is willing to stake their existence on making it a reality. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a baseball player. Not because I was any good about it or even wanted to play baseball, but my dad had been a minor league baseball player, and I thought it would be cool if I could be a baseball player and make it to the major leagues or something, which was a great plan, except I had no talent and I was going blind. That's a bad combination. Well, then Dad took me out and decided it'd be a great father-son deal. He was going to teach me how to play golf. I am worse at golf than I am at baseball. And thankfully, then I found football and Olympic weightlifting and got to finish my career with a gold medal and a championship. But Dad and I got really interested in golf. And on a lot of weekends, we would sit at home and watch the golf tournaments. And the best one every year is the Masters. And you get to, it's springtime, Augusta, this gorgeous setting, and the greatest golfers in the world came and played. And I was excited because my dad's favorite, therefore was my favorite, was and still is Jack Nicklaus. Greatest golfer ever. He's won more majors than anybody. And he was 46 years old, but I was excited he was still playing and he'd made the cut, which means the tournament starts Thursday and Friday, but if you make the cut, if you're in the upper half, you get to play Saturday and Sunday. But at the end of Saturday, Jack was making a charge, and by midday Sunday, Jack's in the tournament. 46 years old. Nobody'd ever won a major that old. And he'd already won 5 Masters, more than anybody ever, and he's going for number 6. And by this time, it was 1986, I was almost totally blind. If I'd get like 6 inches from this giant TV, I could kind of see it. And it got exciting, and I got down there and I watched it, and I remember 17th green, Jack's got to have a 12-foot putt for a chance to win this thing. And I remember the camera was across the green and got a full picture of Jack staring down that putt. And if ever in my life I had then and still keep to this day that vision of single-mindedness, it is that. Nothing in the world mattered. You could have set off a bomb and he would have been staring down that putt. And he waited and he waited and he waited. Thousands of people, total silence. He finally got up, walked over and knocked that putt right in the middle of the Cup. And then later he birdied the 18th and he won his 6th Masters. And afterwards the media was waiting on him. And there was a little delay, and he finally got out there. And later they asked his son, Jackie, who had caddied for him that day, "Where was your dad?" Everybody was waiting, and he said, "Well, Dad had gone to check because before the tournament started, you know, when you win, you get a green jacket, but he'd lost a little weight since the last one, so he had a new jacket made because he knew he was going to win today." Well, after I started narrative television, I made a list of all the people I wanted to interview. Right there was Jack Nicklaus. I chased him for 3 months. It's like Ted Robertson trying to get a free speech, man. And finally, I get a hold of him on the phone. I said, "Sir, I want to interview you for my program." And he said, "Are you any good?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "We'll find out. Come and do this interview." And I remember we talked about that, and I said, "Mr. Nicklaus, one of the last visual things I have in my mind is you staring down that putt on the 17th green at Augusta." And I said, "And you waited, it seemed like a half hour." And I said, "What were you doing?" He said, "Jim, I've never hit a shot that I haven't already seen myself execute perfectly in my mind. We walk by faith and not by sight. And faith is the evidence of things unseen. Faith is the fact you've seen it in your head and now you're going to watch it in the world." And I have people tell me all the time, "Well, Jim, I'll believe it when I see it." No, you'll see it when you believe it. You will see it when you believe it, and you won't see it till then. Take it from a blind guy. You will see it when you believe it. And he will forevermore be my example of single-mindedness. And once I'd finished the interview, I was getting ready to leave. They were packing up the stuff. I said, "Mr. Nicklaus, when you agreed to do this, you asked me if I was any good." He said, "I remember that, and you said you were." I said, "What if I'd said I wasn't?" He said, "Don't ever find out. Don't ever find out." And I will always remember him as that example of single-mindedness. And finally, I want to talk about B is for balance, E is for enthusiasm, S is for single-mindedness, T is for tenacity. The world belongs to the man or woman who will grab onto something and just flat out won't let go. And I remember as a young man, I took a football recruiting trip to the University of Alabama. I didn't want to go to the University of Alabama, but I accepted the trip because I wanted to meet Bear Bryant. And I got there, and he was everything I thought he'd be. He was a legendary figure. And he said, "Son, why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to check out the University of Alabama." He said, "You and I both know you're not going to go to the University of Alabama." I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Who does the Oklahoma Sooners open up with next year?" I said, North Texas State on September 3rd. He said, "Who do we play here at Alabama?" I said, "I have no idea." He said, "I rest my case." He said, "Let's take a walk so at least we won't waste our time." And we walked out on the field, and we walked down to the place on the 2-yard line where you would go for the extra point there. And he said, "Son, I'm going to tell you something you need to remember for the rest of your life. Whether you play ball, you don't, no matter what you do in every area of your life, there's only 2 kinds of people in the world. There's the kind of people, if I hand them the football right here, they'll get it in that end zone right there. And then there's the kind of people that won't." And he said, the people that get it in the end zone, they're not always the fastest, the strongest, the biggest, or the best. They just get it done. And then the people that don't, sometimes they are the fastest and the strongest and the best, but they don't get it done. They've always got an excuse, they just don't get it done. So he said, always remember, there's only 2 kinds of people. There's the people that'll get it in the end zone and the people that won't. And always make sure you're the kind of guy that gets it in the end zone. And make sure you hang around people that when you hand them the ball, they're going to get it in the end zone. And that has stayed with me, and usually I introduce my colleague that's with me earlier in the presentation, but I saved it to now. Because if you met Missy Brigham, you would think this is a gorgeous, fabulous, classy young lady, which she is. She's also one of the most tenacious people I've ever met in my life. She came to me a year ago, got my number out of one of my books, said I was on her bucket list to meet me. And I told her, if I'd have known you, you'd have certainly been on my bucket list. And she's not some kind of go-for employee of mine. She's a colleague. She has a business of her own. She's quite successful in her own right. She doesn't need me. But when I announced I was going to do the Stovall Center for Entrepreneurship and start this program to teach young people from around the world how to start their own companies, she agreed to come and help me do this. And we had an incredibly difficult time getting it done. I tell you, that was a great time to not get it in the end zone and have an excuse not to do it. But we got it done. And then after we got it done, there's been a lot of opposition. Oral Roberts himself told me, if you're not running into opposition, you're going the wrong way. So I've seen her stand up to some of the most difficult opposition anyone could ever imagine. She never blinked, never, she's still going to get it in the end zone, and she does. So before I go any further, would you help me welcome and thank Missy Brigham right there. Well, I make a lot of fun of Ted Robertson when I come here, and I mean every word of it. So, but there's one thing, seriously, I got to tell you about Ted. He will never know. Probably every 2 or 3 months, phone will ring, and they'll say, it's Ted Robertson. And I'll get on the phone, and he'll say, now, Jim, I'm sitting here reading. He doesn't say hello, nothing like that, how you do. He just starts in, Now, Jim, I'm reading here in your book, page 57. And he starts reading it, and now what it says here is this. And I said, well, I'm kind of aware of that. I wrote it, Ted. But it's fun to have him call and read me or tell me what he's reading about. And he'll always say, now I'm reading this for the second or third time. And I didn't catch this the first time or two. But what Ted will never know, only in heaven will he understand how many times I've been sitting there struggling to dictate my next book, and it just isn't coming out. And invariably, the phone will ring. It's Ted Robertson. I'm reading your book here, Jim, on page 57. Here's what it says, and I want you to know how much it means to me and all the books you give that we present to the guys in prison and everything. And I just want to encourage you today to keep writing those books. And the last time he did this, I was writing a book called Will to Win. It's a historical novel about Will Rogers. It'll be out in January. And the main character is a teenage girl in high school. And I just couldn't get this character. I kept trying to write her and get in her head. And it's hard enough to get in my head. Try to get in the head of a teenage girl. And I was just trying to figure this out, and it wasn't working. I'm just about to give up. Phone rings. That's all I need is another interruption, and it's Ted Roberts. Jim, I'm reading in your book here today. And he said, I just want to be an encouragement to you and tell you to keep writing. And I did, and it'll be out in January, and it's already been optioned for a movie. I think it's going to be a great thing. We've got an option to shoot it here. The Will Rogers family is involved, and the Cherokee tribe, and it's going to be an amazing, amazing project. And I really think I would have not gotten it in the end zone if it wasn't for Ted Robertson. And I think my academic background is in psychology, study of human behavior. And the most dynamic discovery in my lifetime was articulated by one of my late great colleagues, Jim Rohn, who said, we become like the 5 people we hang around with the most. The most. And some of you need to think about that right now. Your life, your legacy, your ministry, your income, your impact is going to be the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. And some of you need to consider an upgrade. And I am fortunate that when I'm standing there trying to decide, am I going to be able to get this in the end zone or not, I got people like Ted Robertson calling and Missy Brigham showing up to make sure it happens. And make sure you get some people like that in your life. Then you will have the balance, enthusiasm, single-mindedness, and tenacity it takes to get from wherever you are to wherever you want to be. Anytime you don't think that works, anytime you're frustrated, anytime it's confused, anytime you think the promises that we've all been given don't apply to you, you can go to Jim Stovall, Stovall, jimstovall.com or 918-627-1000. You call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have real live people answer the phone, and I will return your call every time. Because I want you to know the darkest it ever feels, the farthest away it ever appears, the most difficult it ever seems. I want you to know you got one guy believes in you and believes in your dream and the calling on your life. If you don't think so, you pick up that phone, you call me, and we will work that thing out. If that don't work, I'll have Ted call you and read part of one of my books to you. He's real good at that. And I want to thank Ted, as always, for inviting me to be here and putting up with me. I remember when I first met, Ted never told me he was a man of faith or a Christian or a believer or anything else. I just knew it. And we met under some difficult circumstances. And we were on opposite sides of a disagreement. And I was very young at the time, and I didn't know you can't believe everything everybody tells you. And I didn't know the whole story at the time. I didn't know what was going on. And Ted was very patient, very kind with me. And then he told me what the situation was. I said, well, Ted, I hope you realize I didn't know that. He said, I know you did. I know you didn't. And he said, this is going to be a great thing for both of us. And it has been for me, I got to tell you. And he's a great friend and a great man. And every group reflects its leadership. And you're lucky to have Ted, I got to tell you. And go right ahead. I remember the day I went blind, and I moved into that little room in the back of my house, and I had my radio and my telephone and my tape recorder broken, scared and frustrated. And sitting there all alone in the dark in a room I thought I would never leave again, the thought of traveling millions of miles and writing over 40 books or having 8 movies made or running a television network with 1,000 stations or coming here today to talk to you guys would have seemed as foreign to me as going to the moon. And to get to talk to 7,000 of you today, one of the blessings of my life was my friendship with Ray Charles. Ray did his third to last concert here in Tulsa with our Symphonia, and I went over there and we sat backstage and talked before the show, and then Ray went out at the PAC here in Tulsa, and he says, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here at Carnegie Hall. And then he said, look, I know this ain't Carnegie Hall. What you don't know is I ain't Ray Charles. Oh, I want to thank you because, sitting in that room broken, scared, had I known that amazing guys like you got together regularly to help people that needed the help, it would have mattered a lot to me. And as always, I'll leave you with this. Hold on to your dreams and stand tall, even when those around you would force you to crawl. Hold on to your dreams as a race you must run, even when reality whispers you'll never be done. And finally, my friends, hold on to your dreams and wait for the miracle to come, because on that miraculous day, your dreams and your reality will merge into one. Love you more than I can say. See you next time.